Hey guys, Emma here, also known as 8vinyllow, bringing you all another video. Today's video I'm super excited about. It is a contest entry for my buddy Mike over at Jam on Vinyl. First and foremost, as always, if you're not familiar with Mike and his channel, I'm going to link it down in the description below. Make sure to go check him out, go give him a sub, go check out his videos. He makes awesome videos. He's an awesome guy. If you really are into Springsteen, he's a Springsteen guy here in the VC. If you're into mono, he's also the mono guy here in the VC, so he wears a bunch of different hats. It's also extremely interesting because he's been starting to get into kind of American folkways. So it has been extremely fascinating to watch him kind of talk about his exploration in that, as well as showing his building collection in that genre of music. So that's been extremely fun and interesting to watch. So Mike, if you're not familiar with Mike, then you wouldn't know this, but if you are, that's great. I'm going to tell you anyway. He is also a history teacher, which is going to relate to this contest that he's hosting. He's a history teacher. And if you've been watching me and my channel, you know that I have been studying to be a history teacher, and I recently graduated in December. I am now a certified secondary social studies / history / social science, wow, whatever you want to call it, history teacher in Illinois. So currently subbing because mid-year struggles to find a full-time position mid-school year, so but enjoying every second of just being in the classroom. And yeah, so I'm studying to be a history teacher, Mike's a history teacher, that's our connection, and the contest that he's doing is playing off of his channel name, which is Jam on Vinyl. It's Jam on History, so super excited about this contest. When he announced it, I knew that I would have to jump on, and so here I am. Alright, so basically this contest, there are two versions of this question that relate to Mike. First is going to be a very open-ended question that is basically the meat and potatoes of this contest, hence Jam on History. The first one is going to relate to that connection between music and history. The second question is showing your favorite mono album. But again, the first question is based in the namesake of this contest, Jam on History. It's basically highlighting that connection between music and history. Again, he left it very open-ended. So basically what Mike wants us to do is he wants us to show 5 albums, whether it's the entire album in itself, if it's a concept album, or 5 albums with songs on it that have some sort of connection to a historical theme, whether it's a person or an event or just a phenomenon, I don't know. So like I said, it's very open-ended. He left it kind of up to us in terms of what direction we want to take this in, but it has to have that historical connection. So, as I was going through my albums and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with this contest, I was trying to narrow down, one, the records that I had, because I wanted to keep this contest related to records that I had rather than kind of talking about records that I didn't have and then, putting up pictures or whatever it is. I wanted to limit myself to records that I already had. 2, I haven't watched any other entries because I didn't want to be influenced or swayed one way or another by watching videos. So if I pick an album or I pick this theme that I'm going to do that you already did, I'm sorry. I swear I didn't take it from you. I didn't know, but that's just my kind of warning in advance. I didn't know. So, I was going through my albums trying to figure out what I wanted to do. What albums do I have? How does this relate to this, to that, to this event, to this person, to this, whatever it is? And I think I narrowed down what I wanted to do. And so I finally figured it out. However, it was so broad, and I knew it was so broad because teaching it's so broad and it's such a hard concept almost for students to understand. And basically what I wanted to do, because I have my albums, I picked my albums, how do these all relate? Okay, they relate to this theme of the Cold War. Well, that's broad, because the Cold War is this decades and decades and decades long era of political rivalry between the US and USSR. Decades and decades and decades. It's so broad. And so there are so many things that could fit into that one theme of the Cold War. It could go, there's so many different avenues and directions that could go. So I started taking those directions. What do these albums all have in common? Well, I started breaking down what the Cold War was and what that era was. And I narrowed it down to this kind of age of paranoia, right? This age of uncertainty and being paranoid. And why is that? I narrowed that down even more. And I came up with the theme for this contest, the theme of being paranoid, this paranoia over nuclear warfare, the use of nuclear warfare. So that's going to be my theme for this video. Again, the what this is all about, it all relates to the Cold War era. But to break it down even further, we're going with nuclear weapons. Album number 1, The Groundhogs, Thank Christ for the Bomb. This is from 1970. How does this relate to the theme at hand? How does this relate to nuclear warfare? Read the title, Thank Christ for the Bomb. First and foremost, if you're not familiar with the Groundhogs, you need to familiarize yourself. Great British blues band. This album in particular kind of steers away. They still have the blues roots in it, but it kind of steers away from that and starts to experiment with a more acid rock / prog rock type sound to it. Tony T.S. McPhee, who's the lead guitarist of this band, who I absolutely adore, and I've talked about him before, he definitely takes this album into a whole different direction from the other albums that they had released prior to this. Again, still has the elements of the Groundhogs before this and their blues upbringings, so to say, but definitely steered them into a different direction for the better. This is my favorite album that they had released, one of my favorite albums of all time. So if you're not familiar with this, be familiar. Okay, so again, how does this relate to Jam on History? How does this relate to what we're talking about? How does this relate to nuclear warfare? Again, it's in the title. And specifically, what I want to highlight in this album is track number 4, title track. It's called Thank Christ for the Bomb. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the lyrics up so you can read them, specifically what I'm looking at so you can see how they relate. And then we'll come back and we'll kind of discuss those lyrics. So go ahead and read them. So you can just tell by the lyrics, that's exactly what it's talking about. And even to break this down even more, if you haven't listened to the song yet, the song ends, it starts kind of acoustically and then turns into almost this like big band swing and then completely turns into just this like heavy fuzz guitar, acid rock sort of sound. And it stops at a very random part of the song, which is the end of the song. It just stops, and then you hear sirens, and then you hear bombs drop. It's an incredible song with incredible meaning. Just this whole album, this kind of concept album, this visionary tale of Cold War paranoia and alienation. Just this album as a whole covers that. But then that song, when it stops and the sirens go and the bombs drop, it's like, wow. So Thank Christ for the Bomb fits perfectly into the theme that I'm talking about today. Again, you need to grab this album if you don't have it. I can't recommend it more. So, the Groundhogs, Thank Christ for the Bomb. All right, number 2, we have one of the best albums of all time, one of Dylan's best, if not his best. It's up to you to decide. The Freewheelin Bob Dylan. Okay, So, again, fits perfectly into this theme of paranoia and the use of nuclear warfare and new weapons, whatever it is. The song that I'm going with off of this album, and this album in particular is extremely unique, especially in the time that it came out. I think it came out in 1963, and it completely balanced politics and love and just the concept of the album as a whole and the lyrics that were written. Some of the best. Absolutely incredible. So just the theme of the album. But then basing it off of how it relates to our theme for this video, right? This paranoia and everything else that we've been talking about. I'm going with the track Masters of War, basically hitting right at the heart of the problem, heart of the struggle that's occurring. But really there's emphasis on Dylan hitting the military-industrial complex. And I'm going to share that with you in the lyrics now. So as you can tell from those lyrics, right, it still stands the test of time today. Dylan, in an interview for USA Today, is talking about how he writes this song as a kind of jab at Eisenhower's speech as he's leaving office, kind of pushing for this military-industrial complex, kind of emphasizing this. And Dylan writes this protest song in protest of what's happening in the world. So, relates perfectly to our theme, this age of paranoia, this fear of new weaponry, of nuclear warfare during this major theme of Cold War. Number 3, David Bowie's Heroes. I'm going with the title track Heroes. This is from 1977. Basically a song that highlights, again, this sort of oppression that's occurring at this time, this age of paranoia. Why is this happening? Talking about the Berlin Wall now, this song is. And it's basically a story about forbidden love between two lovers, one from East Berlin, one from West Berlin. And what does heroism mean? What does it mean to be finding love against the backdrop of oppression? And so there's a type of heroism element into it, but it also just highlights, again, this world that we were living in during this time. And this just feeling, again, relating to uncertainty that people were having. So here are some lyrics for you to read. All right, coming in at number 4, we have Genesis, Invisible Touch. This is their album from 1986, and the song that I'm going with off of this album is track number 3 on side A, called Land of Confusion. Long story short, simple enough. Basically, this song is a politically fueled song that Genesis writes and is calling out the leaders of both the US and USSR. And if you're not familiar with the music video of Land of Confusion, you'll see exactly what I just said to be true in what they're doing with this song. So check out the music video if you haven't already. Here are the lyrics for you to kind of read through and relate to. Last but not least, I think this is the best way to wrap up just this entire concept and theme we've been talking about. I have a Billy Joel's, not a Billy Joel's, Billy Joel's A Matter of Trust, The Bridge to Russia. that last part, the Bridge to Russia, is going to be exactly what this box set is about, what this concert, what this tour is about. Basically, this box set that I'm holding is a 2 CD set that includes a Blu-ray DVD of a documentary about Billy Joel's historic 1987 tour in Russia. And if you're not familiar with this, I can't recommend it enough. It's so fascinating, and it also includes concert footage from that tour. But it's extremely important. That tour is extremely important in terms of the relations between the US and the USSR that we're talking about in this video right now. Again, relating it back to what does a matter of trust mean? Why did they choose that title for this box set? What does a bridge to Russia mean? How does that relate to the tour? How does that relate to the US? How does it relate to the relationship between the US and the USSR? It's all in just the title itself, but we're going to break that down. So, historic 1987 tour in Russia. Billy Joel being the first rock and roll act to take his show to Russia. And when I mean his show, I mean his band. I mean the lights, the setup, all of it. Bringing that rock and roll show to Russia, they had never seen anything like it. Actually, during the time, right, the USSR was completely anti-rock and roll, that they were animals, that rock stars were animals, and especially the US, you know, but rock stars just in general, and this rock music is just, well, it's like early rock and roll when that first came out, and the feelings that people had towards it. It's the same feelings that people in Russia had towards it. So they were anti-rock and roll. And then eventually, in the late 80s and in 1987, Billy gets this invitation from the Soviet Ministry of Culture. And it's a huge deal. And I remember in the documentary when Billy was talking about how he first announced that he was going to Russia at a show, I think in New Jersey, and the crowd just started booing, right? Again, fitting in, highlighting the sign of the times and how people were feeling and how people felt towards the USSR, that they were the enemy, right? Billy Joel grew up during that early stages of the Cold War, during the stages of air raid drills in school, this fear of nuclear warfare, right? Atomic bombs dropping, so we need to hide under our desk, and hopefully that'll help. We need to duck and cover. That'll save you. But he grew up during that time, and so it's fascinating, the documentary, as he's talking about it, right? People grew up knowing the USSR as their enemy. And so this concert is going to be huge in terms of bridging a bridge to Russia, the gap between the US and USSR, building that communication, and ultimately reaching this cultural breakthrough that Billy was so hoping to do during this tour. And I think he does a great job doing it, and did a great job. And I think that it was an extremely important cultural connection that was needed. So that's why it's an historic tour. So Billy Joel, Matter of Trust, Bridge to Russia, historic 1987 Russian tour. Again, highlighting that cultural breakthrough that Joel and his band was trying to make going into Russia. And if you're not familiar with this concert, you might be familiar with the footage of Billy Joel, the infamous footage of him flipping over his piano in rage because his crew was lighting the audience, and when the audience was lit, they stopped dancing. So there's an infamous video out there of him flipping the piano over during Sometimes a Fantasy, and smashing his mic stand. And actually, it's interesting concert footage. I'm sure that you've seen it, but if you haven't, go check it out. It's interesting. It's fun to watch. It's Billy Joel in rage. So anyway, again, if you're not familiar with this, you need to pick it up. It's so extremely fascinating to me. That might be because 1, I love music, 2, I love Billy Joel, and 3, I love history, and they all mesh together in this. But it's just so, it's cool to see how music brings people together. And what's also cool is Billy Joel talks about in the documentary that he brings his family with him as they go over to Russia, because he wants to show, especially his young daughter Alexa at the time, right, that these are our friends, that they're not our enemy, that these are just people. right? Just living their lives as we're living our life back home. So best way to wrap this up, in my opinion, is kind of an attempt to bridge that gap, to get over this fear and paranoia and uncertainty that people were having, and just living in the moment of being present, of being human beings, of not being enemies, and of just enjoying music and enjoying life. So going with that, that's number 5. All right, that's all I have for you. Those are my 5 albums/songs that relate and connect music to an historical theme. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that maybe you learned something new. And I hope that, if anything, you just enjoyed listening to music talk. So with that, real quickly, I want to move on to question number 2 in Mike's contest. Show your favorite album on mono. And I'm going with a recent pickup of mine, which I have absolutely fallen in love with. I'm going with The Kinks, self-titled. This is the 50th anniversary edition, and it is in mono, and it sounds incredible. And I actually listened to this the other day. That was the first time that I had listened to this album straight through. I love it. So it sounded great. It was a great album just in general, so I'm going with The Kinks, favorite mono album at the moment. So anyway, Mike, again, congratulations on reaching 270. I'm sure you're over that now and you're just going to keep growing. I'm sure you'll be at 300, 350, 400, etc. very, very soon, but congratulations on reaching that milestone in the VC. That's all I have for this video. I will see you all for my next. Bye, guys.